Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. Human mechanic carried a paralyzed alien feline abandoned on a broken alien ship. Milo Vance had seen plenty of derelict ships in his time. The Zephyro wastes were littered with them, graveyards of forgotten battles, smuggling runs gone wrong, and scavengers who pushed their luck too far. It was a playground for mechanics like him, men who made their living from the discarded wreckage of the galaxy. But this ship was different. The Obsidian Fong had no distress beacon, no registration codes pinging on his scanner. It was half buried in the jagged cliffs outside his, wedged between rock and rusted debris like it had been there for years, and yet something about it felt wrong. Milo hesitated at the threshold, his boots crunching against scorched metal. The ship had been torn apart from the inside, claw marks raked through the walls, control panels shattered beyond repair. Whatever had happened here, it hadn't been quick. He moved cautiously through the ruined corridors, his flashlight slicing through the gloom. The deeper he went, the more unsettling the silence became, no bodies, no signs of a struggle beyond the destruction. It was as if the crew had simply vanished. Then, in the heart of the ship, past collapsed bulkheads and debris, he found it, a cage. It was massive, forged from reinforced alloy, built to contain something big. The locking mechanism had long since failed, leaving the heavy door hanging open at an angle. Milo's grip tightened on his flashlight as he stepped closer, and that's when he saw it, curled in the farthest corner, its massive form barely rising. With shallow breaths, it was a tiger. Not just any tiger. Its fur shimmered beneath layers of grime, deep orange streaked with black stripes, but laced with something else, something unnatural. When the light hit just right, the stripes pulsed with faint bioluminescence, like embers buried in the dark. Milo exhaled sharply, stunned by the sheer size of it. Even collapsed in exhaustion, the creature was enormous, easily the length of a hover truck. Muscles hidden beneath ragged fur, chains still clung to its legs, but they were slack, broken. Whoever had locked it here never came back to check if it survived, and by the looks of it, it wouldn't survive much longer. Milo knelt slowly, instincts warning in his head that he had no business getting involved. This wasn't his problem. Hell, for all he knew, the thing was dangerous. But then the tiger shifted, just barely, just enough for its head to lift an inch and for one eye, a piercing silver eye, to crack open and meet his. Not wild, not empty, not even desperate, just tired. Milo clenched his jaw. "Yeah, all right," he muttered, "guess I'm an idiot," and with that, he moved to save the damn thing. The tiger was heavy, not just in size, but in presence. Milo had done his fair share of salvaging over the years, dragging everything from busted reactors to entire ship engines across the wastes, but this was something else. It took him an hour just to cut the damn chains, another hour to rig a makeshift sled out of old cargo plating, and 3 more to get the beast out of the wreck and onto his transport. Through it all, the tiger barely reacted. It let him work, its breath coming slow and uneven. But watching him, that was the part that unnerved him the most. The eyes, it wasn't just an animal's stare, there was intelligence behind it, awareness, as if it understood exactly what was happening but lacked the strength to do anything about it. Milo didn't think too hard about that. He had a long drive back to his workshop and he wasn't interested in second-guessing himself. The whole way, by the time he rolled into his dusty garage, the twin suns of Zephyro had started to dip below the jagged cliffs. His workshop was nothing special, just a battered old building made from scrap, cluttered with half-finished projects and rusted equipment, but it was home. He powered down the transport, stepping out into the warm, dry air. The tiger barely stirred on the sled. Milo frowned. He needed to get fluids in it, food, something to stop it from slipping further away. Cursing under his breath, he grabbed his medkit and got to work. First was water. He rigged a slow drip, forcing small amounts between its fangs, careful not to drown the thing in the process. The tiger swallowed weakly, but at least it swallowed, that was something. Next, he started assessing the damage. The paralysis wasn't from the crash, at least not entirely. There were scars beneath the fur, long surgical lines where something had been done to it. Milo's stomach twisted as he traced the marks. Experimentation, the bastards hadn't just captured this thing, they had used it. He exhaled sharply, pushing the thought aside. Well, big guy, he muttered, securing another set of bandages, whoever left you behind really didn't give a damn, huh? The tiger didn't answer, not that he expected it to. But then, as he finished off the bandaging, a sound, a soft, barely there, deep, slow rumble that vibrated through the ground beneath him, made him freeze. It wasn't a growl, it wasn't a warning, it was purring, a slow, weak, exhausted purr. Milo blinked, then let out a rough, breathless chuckle. Well, he murmured, guess you don't hate me after all. The tiger didn't move, but the purring continued just a little. Milo sat back, running a hand through his hair. He was tired, covered in grime, and more than a little aware that he had just done something incredibly stupid. But as he looked at the massive creature lying in his workshop, its breathing a little steadier, its wounds cleaned, its life no longer hanging by a thread, he didn't regret it. The days passed in slow, quiet recovery. Milo hadn't realized just how much work it would take to nurse an alien tiger back from the brink of death, but he wasn't the type to quit halfway. He didn't question himself anymore, he'd made his choice at first. The tiger barely moved its massive body, still weak from months of neglect. Milo didn't push it, he spent hours tending to the scars, checking for signs of infection, making sure the creature got enough fluids. He experimented with food, eventually settling on a mix of high-protein meal packs and a few carefully selected meats from his own rations. It took time, but the tiger ate, and it watched him, even when it couldn't move much, those silver eyes tracked him across the workshop. It wasn't the dull stare of an injured animal, it was something else, something thoughtful, aware, almost calculating. It made Milo uneasy at first, he wasn't used to being studied like he was the strange one in the room. One evening, after another long day of salvaging parts in the wastes, he sat on the ground beside the tiger, idly flipping a wrench in his hands. "You got a name?" he asked, not really expecting an answer. "I feel like you should have a name." Silence. The tiger exhaled, its large chest rising and falling steadily. "I can't just keep calling you Tiger, that's lazy as hell," he rubbed his jaw. A memory surfaced unbidden, a name from an old galactic myth, one about an untamed beast that defied the gods themselves. He smirked. "Cow." The tiger's ear flicked. Milo arched a brow. "That means something to you?" A long pause. The silver eyes met his, then the faintest rumble of acknowledgement. Milo huffed a laugh. "Yeah, that's what I thought." Tau, the name settled between them, quiet but certain. Milo didn't question why it felt right, he just accepted it. Cow's recovery was slow but steady. Every day, the tiger pushed a little further, small movements at first, then the first attempts at standing. The first time he tried, his legs trembled violently under his weight. Milo rushed forward, but Cow growled a warning, not a threat, and the mechanic stopped in his tracks. Milo gritted his teeth, watching as the tiger struggled. The instinct to help clawed at him, but he knew better, this was Cow's fight. Minutes passed in painful, tense silence. Then Cow stood. Milo let out a slow breath, shaking his head. "Damn stubborn cat." Cow huffed, as if in agreement, before promptly collapsing back onto the workshop floor. Progress. By the end of the week, he was moving on his own, albeit slowly. He would pace around the workshop, inspecting everything with silent curiosity. He never touched anything, never knocked over tools or machinery, it was too deliberate. Milo wasn't stupid, he knew Cow was different. More than just a wounded beast, there was something else there, something deeper. The confirmation came late one night. Milo had fallen asleep in the corner of the workshop, exhaustion finally dragging him under. He woke to the feeling of eyes on him. When he cracked his own open, Cow was staring at him, not like an animal watching its caretaker, not like a predator watching prey, but like a man watching another man. And in that moment, Milo knew Cow was no ordinary tiger. And whatever he was, whoever he was, his past was coming for him. Milo had seen plenty of strange things in his life, but nothing unsettled him quite like waking up to Cow watching him like that, like a sentient being trying to remember something long lost. He didn't say anything about it the next day, but the thought nagged him like rust on a ship's hull. Cow was healing at an unnatural pace. Within a week of standing for the first time, he was walking without hesitation, his strength returned in steady increments, his muscles filling out his movements, regaining the natural grace of a predator in its prime. But what struck Milo the most was how calculated it all was. Cow wasn't just recovering, he was retraining himself. One evening, as the desert sky bled into its usual crimson hue, Milo watched from the doorway of his workshop as Cow prowled the perimeter, testing his limits. His movements were too refined, too controlled to belong to a simple beast. This isn't instinct alone. This was memory. You were trained for something, weren't you? Milo muttered more to himself than to Cow. The tiger stopped mid-stride and turned his head slightly, his golden eyes gleaming in the dim light. The unspoken answer settled between them. Milo sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. Yeah, figures. That same night, the silence of the wastes was shattered by a sound Milo hadn't heard in years, a deep, resonating not from the ground but from above, the kind of sound that only came from ships breaking through the atmosphere, big ones. Milo's blood ran cold. Stepping outside, he followed the low hum of engines to the sky and felt his stomach twist into knots. 2 ships, not local, not the kind of junker vessels that smugglers or pirates flew, these were sleek, black, and military grade. They were searching for something, for someone. Cow stood beside him now, his fur bristling, his ears pressed back. He wasn't looking at the ships in fear, he was looking at them in recognition. Milo clenched his jaw. He didn't need to be a genius to figure it out, someone had come for Cow, and judging by the size of those ships, it wasn't to take him back gently. Milo barely had time to process before the first ship descended. The engines kicked up a whirlwind of dust, sending waves of heat and static through the air. The second ship remained hovering above, its shadow looming over the junkyard like a storm waiting to break. Milo felt the weight of a fight pressing in, suffocating him. He shot a glance at Cow. The tiger was as still as stone, his golden eyes locked on the descending ship, muscles coiled but not yet ready to strike. Whoever was on that ship, Cow knew them. The ramp hissed open, revealing a towering figure clad in intricate black armor, the kind that wasn't just for battle, but ceremonial, worn by warriors of high rank. The armor's polished plates shimmered with iridescent streaks shifting like liquid metal under the desert sun. And then the figure stepped forward. Milo stiffened. This wasn't just some random bounty hunter or galactic officer, this was royalty. The man, if he even qualified as such, was tall, broad-shouldered, with piercing silver eyes that mirrored Cow's own. His presence alone was suffocating, as if the very air bent around him, forced to acknowledge his existence. When he spoke, his voice was deep, steady, and filled with quiet, controlled fury. You have something that belongs to me, the man said. Milo exhaled slowly, stepping forward just enough to put himself slightly in front of Cow. Gotta be more specific, he drawled. I've got a lot of junk lying around. The royal warrior's eyes didn't even flicker toward him, his gaze remained locked on Cow for a long, breathless moment. No one moved. Then softly, barely more than a whisper, he spoke again. Brother. Milo's gut twisted. He turned to Cow, searching for any kind of reaction, but Cow didn't move, not at first. Then, with slow deliberation, he lifted his head and stepped forward, meeting the stranger's gaze without hesitation. The connection between them was immediate, not just recognition, not just memory, but history. Milo swore under his breath, he should have known Cow wasn't just an abandoned experiment. He was exiled royalty, and now his people had come to collect him. The air between them was thick with something unspoken, an attention so taut that it felt like the entire planet was holding its breath. Cal stood still, his powerful body poised but not hostile, his golden eyes locked onto his so-called brother. The man in the obsidian armor did not look at Milo, did not even acknowledge his presence. His entire focus was on Cal, as if nothing else in the universe mattered. Cal didn't move. Milo had spent weeks watching him learn to walk again, watching him fight through the pain of atrophied muscles and healing scars. He had witnessed the intelligence lurking behind those silver-gold eyes, the way he observed everything before making a move. This was no animal, he had never been just an animal. And yet, he said nothing. The silence stretched long enough for Milo to grit his teeth. He was a patient man when it came to machines, but he had no patience for royal bastards showing up at his house and making demands. So, you want to explain why you left your brother to rot in a busted ship for months, or are we just going to pretend that didn't happen? Milo said, breaking the silence. The royal warrior's gaze snapped to him, then cold and sharp as a blade. You do not speak, the warrior said, his tone as smooth as it was dangerous. This is not your concern, human. Milo barked out a laugh. Not my concern, buddy. I dragged his half-dead ass out of that wreck, nursed him back to health, and almost got my damn ribs broken trying to keep him from killing himself by being too stubborn to rest. If that doesn't make it my concern, I don't know what does. The warrior's jaw clenched ever so slightly, his perfect, polished stance flickered for a half-second. You overstep, and you're an ass. Milo shot back, folding his arms. Seams of even a low, rumbling sound filled the space between them. It took Milo a second to realize it was coming from Cal, not a growl, not laughter. The warrior's eyes flickered with something almost like surprise, flashing behind them. Cal shifted, finally moving for the first time, stepping past Milo with a slow, deliberate grace. His golden eyes never left his brother's face. You came, Cal finally said, his voice deep and measured, the first words he had spoken since they arrived. Took you long enough. The warrior exhaled something tight and unreadable. I searched for you for months, he said. We believed you were dead. Cal tilted his head slightly. And yet here I stand. A shadow passed through his brother's eyes, a flicker of guilt. We did not know, the warrior said, quieter this time. Father ordered your exile. No one was permitted to look for you. Milo frowned. Exile, that explained a lot. The wounds, the chains, the scars beneath the scars. The warrior's voice was softer now, but no less sharp. And yet here you are. His brother's lips pressed into a thin line. The throne is shifting. Father's rule grows weaker, his enemies rise. Some call for you. Cal let out a slow breath, his golden gaze unreadable. And you? The warrior hesitated just for a moment. I call for my brother. At last, Cal was silent. Milo didn't know what the hell he had walked into, but he could feel the weight of it. This wasn't just about a missing prince, this was about something bigger. Cal turned his head slightly, looking at Milo. He didn't say anything, but the meaning was clear. Milo had given him a choice, and now his brother was doing the same. But before Cal could answer, a sharp sound cut through the tension, a warning alarm. Milo's heart stopped. From the second ship above, bright red lights flared along its underbelly. He knew what that meant. He had seen it before in old war zones, in scavenger hunts gone wrong, targeting systems. They weren't alone, and whoever else was out there, they were locked on. The first explosion rocked the ground hard enough to send dust clouds into the air. The second barely missed the front of Milo's workshop, slamming into an old wreck nearby and ripping it apart in a fireball of heat and debris. Milo barely had time to dive behind cover, shielding his head as flaming scrap metal rained from the sky. He heard the roar of engines, the sharp, metallic whine of plasma cannons charging up again. Someone was attacking, and they weren't aiming to take prisoners. Milo risked a glance over the wreckage. In the sky above, a third ship had appeared, larger and more menacing than the other two. The markings along its hull were unfamiliar, but the intent was clear: this wasn't a rescue mission, it was an execution. The royal warrior turned sharply, barking something in a language Milo didn't understand. His own soldiers scattered, weapons drawn, forming a protective ring around him. But Milo could see it in his face: they were caught off guard, they hadn't expected this. Cal stood firm, eyes locked on the enemy ship, his fur bristled, muscles tense beneath his glowing stripes. He wasn't afraid, he was ready. Milo cursed under his breath and grabbed his rifle. "So," he muttered, shooting a look at Cal, "are your father's people or someone worse?" Cal's lips curled just slightly. "Worse, fantastic," Milo groaned. "What's the plan?" Cal didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned to his brother, his face set in hard determination. "Enough," Cal exhaled sharply, "then, let's end this quickly." The next blast came faster than the first, a streak of red-hot plasma tearing through the sky. But this time, Cal moved with a speed that defied his size. He leapt, landing atop one of the wrecked ships with a grace that sent shock waves through the ground. His golden eyes glowed fiercely now, his body crackling with something primal, and then he roared. The sound wasn't just a roar, it was a shock wave of raw power that rattled the air itself, making the enemy ship's shields flicker. The sky seemed to ripple, as if the force of his voice alone could tear through reality itself. The enemy ship hesitated. Milo grinned. "Well," he muttered, cocking his rifle, "that's new." Cal leapt down beside him, muscles still humming with energy. "Stay close, human," he rumbled. Milo huffed a laugh, adrenaline surging. Yeah. Let's kick their asses." And as the battle began, for the first time in years, Milo wasn't fighting alone, the battlefield erupted into chaos. Milo barely had time to react before the sky exploded in a storm of energy blasts and plasma fire. His instincts, honed from years of working salvage runs in places he never should have been, kicked in. He ducked behind the remnants of his workshop, breathing through the smoke curling into the air. Cal moved like a force of nature. One second he was beside Milo, the next he was gone, a blur of silver-gold fur streaking toward the enemy line. The ground trembled beneath his weight as he lunged at the first of the enemy warriors, his claws ripped through armor like it was paper, sending bodies flying as his roar cracked the air like a whip. Milo had no time to be impressed, the ship above was still firing, and if they didn't take it down soon, it wouldn't matter how many ground troops Cal tore through. He turned toward the royal warrior, Cal's brother, who was already issuing orders to his men. Even now, even in the heat of battle, he moved like a king. "We need to take that damn ship out," Milo shouted over the sound of gunfire. The warrior glanced at him, his silver eyes calculating. "You're human. What do you suggest?" Milo rolled his eyes. "You're really going to get picky about species, now?" He pulled a small device from his belt and tossed it to the warrior. "That's a remote charge, stick it somewhere useful." The warrior caught it effortlessly, nodding once. Then, without another word, he moved, disappearing into the battlefield. Milo turned his attention back to the fight just in time to see Cal take a direct hit. A cannon blast slammed into his side, sending him skidding across the dirt, fur scorched where the energy had burned through. Milo's heart stopped, but then Cal stood up, smoke curled off his fur, but his eyes burned hotter than ever. And when he grinned, it was sharp, wild, something deadly in the way his teeth gleamed under the fires around them. "That all you got?" Cal growled. The enemy didn't answer, because Cal didn't give them time. He launched himself forward, tearing through the battlefield like a storm given form, moving so fast that the air itself seemed to tremble around him. And then Milo saw it. Cal wasn't just fighting, he was taking back what had been stolen from him. The battle ended in fire. Milo stood at the edge of the wreckage, watching as the enemy ship, now crippled, its engines dead, smoke pouring from its hull, crashed into the distant hills. The explosion sent a shock wave rippling through the ground, but Milo barely felt it. His entire focus was on Cow. The tiger stood among the bodies of his enemies, his chest rising and falling with deep, controlled breaths, his fur was singed, and blood not his own clung to his claws. He turned his head, meeting Milo's gaze, and for the first time Milo saw him for what he truly was, not just an abandoned creature, not just a warrior, but a king. His brother approached, then, stepping over debris, his expression unreadable. "It's over," he said. Cow exhaled, looking at the remnants of their enemies. "No," he murmured, "it's just begun." Milo's heart pounded. "What the hell does that mean?" he asked. Cow turned to face him fully, something lighter in his expression now. "It means I'm not going back." His brother stiffened. "You must," Cow's golden eyes burned. "I must do nothing. I am no longer a prisoner of our father, and I will not fight for a throne built on chains." Milo watched the royal warrior's face carefully, his jaw tightened, his hands clenched into fists, but he didn't argue. Instead, after a long silence, he bowed his head. "As you wish, brother." Cow studied him, then huffed a quiet laugh. "You've changed." His brother smirked. "You too." Milo sighed, rubbing his temples. "All right, great. So what now? You going to start your own kingdom out in the wastes?" Cow grinned sharply and freely. "No, but I think I'll stay for a while." Milo snorted. "Well, hell, guess I better reinforce my workshop then." Cow nudged him, nearly knocking him over. "Don't act like you don't want me here, human."